everyone. My name is Don, the movie reviewer, and today we're going to be talking about Mike Flanagan's Dr. Sleep.
Get out of my head! Get out!
I haven't felt power like that in so long.
They're coming. Where are we going?
There's a place. You sure you want to do this?
I'm ready.
Yes, you run, dear. And then I will find you, and you will scream for years.
Mike Flanagan is an interesting director. I have seen a few of his movies. I saw Oculus, which I thought was pretty good. I also saw Hush, which had an interesting execution. And I also saw Gerald's Game, which was very weird. I think Mike Flanagan is an interesting director because of the choices of movies he has decided to make. Mostly it's horror, and some of it is from Stephen King. And so for him to take on this movie, Dr. Sleep, is interesting because of the sandbox that Mike Flanagan likes to play in. Like I said with Hush, the Hush movie he made, it had a very interesting execution to it. So I feel like this guy, Mike Flanagan, when he directs a horror movie, he absolutely knows what he's doing. So with that being said, how do I feel about Stanley Kubrick's The Shining? You're not going to like my answer. I am not a huge fan of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Yes, guilty as charged. I'm not a huge fan of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. However, I do feel that Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is an exceptional technical movie. The directing, the score, the cinematography, the performances from a few of the actors are exceptional. So, on a merit of, yes, hey, visual flair, score, execution, all of that stuff is mwah, mwah. It's fantastic. It's exceptional. But from a story standpoint, I just feel like the movie doesn't really progress in any way, shape, or form. It's just kind of staying stationary because with Jack Nicholson's performance in the movie, yes, Jack Nicholson is a fine actor when he wants to be. And in this movie, it feels like that Nicolas Cage, John Travolta thing that a lot of people talk about where they just play crazy characters, and Jack Nicholson is known to do some crazy things in his movies and play a crazy character. I guess that's happened as he's gotten older. Like for example, when you watch Jack Nicholson in the Batman movie, it's not the Joker, it's Jack Nicholson playing the Joker, right? You don't really see a character. I see Jack Nicholson. And that's the same thing that happens with Jack Nicholson in The Shining, is that it doesn't feel like he's playing a character. He's playing himself, or an extended version, fairy tale version of himself.
When I come up against a director who has a concept that maybe I don't agree with it, maybe I just hadn't thought of it or whatever, I'd be more prone to go with them than my own because I want to be out of control as an actor. I want them to have the control. Otherwise, it's going to become predictably my work, and that's not fun.
I mean, the character's name is Jack Torrance, Jack Nicholson. It's the same person, right? And I feel that character in the movie is not a character. It's Jack Nicholson. Yes, he may have, a past with alcoholism, and he's trying to deal with that, and the house tempts him by having him drink some more and all of that stuff, but I don't feel like the movie really illustrates his drinking problem. It's just like a thing that is mentioned, and then, they kind of touch on it, but they don't really, go deep with it in any way. So I feel like the progression with that is just kind of like it's stationary. And then, with the house going crazy, or the hotel, the Overlook Hotel going crazy, and then, attacking on the family and tempting Jack Torrance to murder his family and all that stuff. To me, it's just kind of boring. It's kind of boring. I don't care about the execution of the story in The Shining, so that's why I'm not a huge fan of it. But like I said, from a a technical standpoint, visually, cinematography, directing, score, the way Stanley Kubrick created that, the way he crafted that piece of art, it is an art, that movie. It is a piece of art, and I respect it. But from a narrative, story, constructive standpoint, I just feel like it really doesn't go anywhere, and I just have problems with The Shining. So with that being said, I was not looking forward to this Doctor Sleep movie because it is a sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. And like I said, I appreciate Stanley Kubrick's technical achievements with that movie. It is art, but from a narrative standpoint, I don't care for it. So with this, I was like, I don't know, man. It's like I'm not a fan of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, and this is a sequel to that. But then, like I said about Mike Flanagan, he's a very interesting director, and I feel like he knows what he's doing when he creates a horror movie. And on top of that, I saw the trailer for Doctor Sleep. I was very intrigued. I was like, okay, I might go see this. But then what initially got me excited was hearing reviews, positive reviews from, yes, fans of The Shining, but fans of this movie in general on its own. That's what got me intrigued, because a lot of people said that, this movie, it has little touches of Stanley Kubrick in there, and it's a perfect illustration to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. It feels like an actual sequel. And it kind of ties up some of the loose ends in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. So hearing that got me really intrigued. And then I looked up online, it's got 74% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's not a really high score, but that just gives you a general census of, yes, people did like this movie for the most part. And like I said, not a fan of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. I was nervous about this, but the director is very interesting. I like a few of his movies. And the very positive response that this movie received got me intrigued. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm game. I'm going to give this a shot. And I didn't know what to expect. I was like, am I going to love it? Am I going to hate it? Well, how am I going to feel about this? Of course, fans of The Shining like it. And that's another interesting thing. Is what I heard in a lot of people's reviews is that, now I haven't read the books. I haven't read the Shining novel, and I haven't read the Dr. Sleep novel. And I might one day, I don't know yet. But it's interesting because Stephen King doesn't care for Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, because Stephen King feels like Stanley Kubrick took his novel in a different direction and didn't make what Stephen King had illustrated in his book. So Stephen King's not a fan of The Shining, and there are a lot of people who are. And so it seems like that was a studio decision to be like, okay, we got to make a sequel to The Shining, and it's got to be from Stanley Kubrick's version because people love that, and we got to make that money, so we got to make that sequel. And sometimes these are not handled with care. But like I said, I respect Mike Flanagan as a horror director. I feel like he knows what he's doing, so I feel like this movie was in the right hands and a competent director. And having to please the audience while also probably trying to stay faithful to the book probably may have been a hard task for Mike Flanagan, which is what a lot of people said in their reviews, and I'm saying the same thing, because this is like a kind of a slippery slope, as you may call it, that he's going down here. But yeah, based on all the positive feedback, I was intrigued and I was interested to see what was going to happen in Dr. Sleep. Is it better or worse, or on its own, where does it stand as far as Stanley Kubrick's The Shining goes? Let's find out. So at the very beginning, Dr. Sleep feels a little choppy to me because it's jumping back and forth between narratives. First, we are introduced to this cult with Rebecca Ferguson, and this cult kills this child, and that's weird. That happens in a lot of the Stephen King novels and movies. He has this fascination with killing kids. And as I was watching this movie, I was like, why does he have this fascination? Maybe it has to do with innocence. Kids are very innocent, and seeing that happen is very sad, because there is a scene in Dr. Sleep where this kid gets brutally murdered while they're stealing his shine. That's what this cult is all about. They also have the shine, but then they call it steam, this energy your spirit, you could say, that's within inside yourself. And then when they kill you, the fear of death makes the shine steam and it makes it stronger. So there's a scene where they kill this kid, and it's really sad and it made me cry, because it's a kid and it's an innocent life they're taking away for their own selfish reasons. And I don't know what the deal with that is with Stephen King, but it's effective. But yeah, at the very beginning of this movie, I feel like it's very choppy because first, we're introduced to this cult, which is understandable because we need to set up, okay, who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. So it does that pretty choppy at the beginning. Like I said, we meet Rebecca Ferguson and her cult, which is a very engaging scene. But then right after that, we meet Dan Torrance, who, well, it goes back to the first Shining movie. And we see the tricycle, the bike thing, the big wheel thing when he's going through the halls. And, they recreate that moment with a new child actor and a new character who plays the mother. And to me, that felt a bit jarring because more often than not, when I watch a movie that's a sequel to something, I'm usually expecting to see the original actors. So I was expecting them to go in the direction of like, oh, we're going to see the young Dan Torrance from the first movie. It's just going to be a kid's body and they're going to digitally de-age or just do a digital face for the actor so we can see that person, and I was expecting that to happen with Jack Nicholson. And, they didn't go in that direction, which I commend the director for doing that because, yes, when I do see a movie where they have actors who are supposed to play characters from the original movie, but then you obviously can't get those actors back because people get older, they decide to digitally de-age them. And it's just like, as they call it, the uncanny valley. It's like, it just looks weird. It doesn't fit. It just takes me out of the movie because I know I'm looking at a digital face. And so I'm like, I'm supposed to, I understand why you're doing it because you want that recognition. Like, oh, remember this person. This is their face. But it just feels odd. So I'm glad he didn't go in that direction. He actually just recast everybody. And he didn't get exact duplicates. Like, they don't look exactly like the Danny Torrance boy doesn't look like the original actor or anything like that. But I accepted it. It played it out really well. They recreated the scene. And so at first, when I saw that, it just felt odd to me because I was like, okay, why are you recreating this? Are you just trying to bank off of the nostalgia, which is what a lot of these sequels do? And I feel like this movie does that. It does bank on the nostalgia of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, but it plays it up in a way that makes sense. It uses that to further advance Danny Torrance's narrative within the story. Because at first I was like, this is a bit jarring. Why are you doing this? But then they progressed it and they showed us the events that happened after The Shining, the movie. And so I'm like, okay, this is interesting. And then we see Dick Hallorann. His character returns, but it's not, CGI, bringing the actor back from the dead. It's a new actor who looks nothing like the guy, but he has the same voice. And, mentally, I can recognize it. It's mental recognition where I'm like, okay, I know who this character is. I've seen The Shining. Yes, it's not the same actor, but I like seeing the same person for continuity reasons. But if you can't do it, you can't get them. You don't want to do the digital de-aging thing because it will take a person out of the movie. I like the way Mike Flanagan went. He's like, I'm just going to recast it, bring in a new actor. It's great. So we see Dick Hallorann, and he comes back, and he's guiding Dan through his emotional journey after what happened to him in the Overlook Hotel. And the interesting thing about Dick Hallorann is, like I said, I did not read the book, but when the book first came out, Dr. Sleep, I did read some reviews on it. And from what I understand, Dick Hallorann did not die in the Shining book. Dick Hallorann died in Stanley Kubrick's movie for whatever reason. He's the only character that died. But he died in the movie, but not in the book. And so in Dr. Sleep, the character returns to guide Dan Torrance through his emotional journey. And in this, I was wondering how they were going to do that. Like, he's dead. How are you going to bring him back, But they did it in a way that made sense, It is kind of the cliche thing where it's like, yeah, you have your spiritual guide and all this stuff. But knowing the history of this character and knowing who these characters are from The Shining, seeing them appear in this, it works and it makes sense. So it ties in The Shining with this, and takes it in a new direction. It's kind of like that Jedi thing where it's like you die and then you become a Jedi ghost, whatever they call it. So it's kind of like that, but it makes sense and it works. It does it from a surface level. Just thinking about that, it kind of feels odd. Like this is kind of like weird, but the way the movie's executed, it works. I don't question it. It's just it happens, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, okay, I'm going along with it. So then, yeah, Dick Hallorann comes to guide Danny through his emotional journey because Danny's still dealing with the ghost of his past from the Overlook Hotel. So then Dick tells him how to like capture those spirits and lock them away, and that's what Danny does until his adulthood when we see Ewan McGregor. And Ewan McGregor, plays Dan Torrance. He's an alcoholic. We see him in a lot of shitty moments, and it's interesting because we're following this character on his journey. So it's very, very interesting. But then, like I said, it's just choppy because then we go to this little girl, and this girl has the shine. We see her when she's a little kid, and she's at a birthday party, and she's really hurting this magician's feelings because he's doing all these magic tricks, and she's like, I can do that. And he's like, yeah, okay. But then there's a scene that kind of feels like the first Poltergeist movie, where they do something with a bunch of like silverware, and she has the silverware on the ceiling, and the parents are all freaked out and all this stuff. So that was interesting for the most part, but at the very beginning of this movie, it just felt very choppy. It's like we're jumping from one thing to another thing to another thing, because like they show the cult and what they're doing, they illustrate that, and they go to Dan Torrance in the past when he's a kid, and they fast forward to his future when he's adult, and then it goes to the little girl and her powers, and there's this very, very choppy stuff happening. It's like so much that I feel that if you haven't seen The Shining, you may be a little confused with the whole flashback sequences of Dan Torrance when he's a child. Maybe you don't need the illustration of The Shining to explain it, but I feel like if you haven't seen The Shining, it may be a little confusing with all of the jumping back and forth. But after that initial setup of learning who the cult is, and Dan and his journey, emotional journey, and then the kid and her powers, after all of that initial setup, that's when I feel like the movie does start to kick off into a high gear. Now, after we got all of the initial setup of the characters and who they are and where they're headed out of the way, movie kicks into high gear. We have Dan Torrance, played by Ewan McGregor, who is an adult, and he goes through his shitty journey of alcoholism like his father, Jack Torrance. And I appreciate this movie bringing the alcoholism situation to the forefront, which I feel like The Shining kind of like put that. It was present in The Shining with Jack Nicholson's character. Like they mentioned it at the beginning and how he tried to get sober, and then the ghost tried to tempt him. But I never felt like that was a huge issue. That's one of the problems I have with Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, is I feel like the alcoholism aspect of that movie with the Jack Torrance character wasn't illustrated in a perfect way to where it made me feel that emotional depth. And with this, they go for it. So it's a trajectory. It's like, you become your parents. Whatever your parents did, is in your DNA now, and then you're ultimately going to become your parents, which is kind of what the narrative of this movie is with the Danny Torrance character, because he becomes an alcoholic like his father, dealing with all the emotional trauma of his past. And that's very interesting. And then it goes with him. We follow him on his journey of him trying to get sober and him struggling with that. And then we see, Rebecca Ferguson and this cult. And like I said before, the things they do are horrifying. They kill kids in this movie. And like I said, one scene really made me cry when they killed this kid. And you see the blood, and it's very sad. It's very sad. And then I feel like this one actor, Kayla Karan, is phenomenal in this movie, because the scene where we see this boy being killed for his shine, his spirit, his soul, his steam, to feed the cult and make them more powerful. When we see that scene taking place, not only is it sad because the boy's being killed, it's an innocent life being taken from this earth, but then the Kayla character, her character is very emotional about it. and she's like, they're killing him, they're killing him. And so with her performance, along with that visual illustration of what this cult is doing, those things combined really sold that emotional, depth that I really wanted in this movie. It sold that emotion. So not only do I understand what Dan Torrance is going through on his own path, but then I also see what the cult is doing on their path and how horrifying it is and how it affects this actor, this character in the movie, this girl, and her connection with them and how powerful she is, as her shine is so powerful that she can tap into other people doing things who also have the shine, So when she sees this cult doing something horrific, it doesn't really explain it, but she somehow gets in contact with Dan Torrance, because why not? I mean, the movie doesn't explain that. It doesn't need to, but it's just kind of like, okay, they just happen to meet each other through the shine force or whatever. So it's like, yes, like I said, just on the surface level, when you just look at it, it's kind of silly stuff, but with the way the movie's constructed, like I said, the beginning is a bit choppy, but then when it really gets going is when they set up the characters and now they're off, on their journeys, and they cross paths. That's the most interesting part of the movie, because from there on it builds. It has a lot of emotional depth to it, with Dan Torrance dealing with his alcoholism, trying to get over it. Then with the girl dealing with her powers, struggling with that, seeing this cult going on their murderous killing spree, having the girl be emotionally tied to that, then her connecting with Dan, and the moment where we see the red rum scene, the murder scene, is not only an interesting callback to The Shining, but then when that moment happened, it made me feel like, yeah, shit just got real. Like, this girl's reaching out to Dan. It's like, you need to help me. We need to stop this cult from killing these innocent kids. And Dan, he's like, I don't want no part of this. You just got to keep your head down, because he's been through this kind of stuff before, not to this extent, but he's just like, I'm really trying to get sober. I'm trying to fix myself up emotionally. I finally found something good that is pleasant in my life that can get me away from my past, and now all of this shit comes flooding back, because you come into my life and all this stuff. He's not blaming her, but it's like all of this stuff, is coming back to him, and he doesn't want any part of it. But as the movie progresses, it's like, okay, ultimately everything comes to a head. The characters cross paths, and like I said before, this movie does have little nostalgia moments of The Shining in it. And at first it may feel a bit jarring, like, oh, you're just doing this for nostalgia and trying to get a cash grab. But when you really think about it, I feel that the nostalgia moments, yes, they're nostalgia, but they're not only that, they're there to illustrate the story. They're there to show you what these characters, Dan Torrance especially, is going through, and then where he is headed. So then when we get to the ultimate conclusion, which, I don't think is a spoiler because they give it away in the trailers, is they go to the Overlook Hotel. They go back to the hotel, and he wakes up the hotel for the final battle. And when they went back there, at first I said, okay, obviously this is nostalgia because they're playing the score from The Shining, which I think the opening sequence to The Shining is amazing because of the score and the visual stuff. Like I said, technical aspects of The Shining are amazing. So they go back to that nod. Then it starts snowing, and it looks like digital snow at first when they're pumping gas at the gas station. It looks like digital snow. I'm like, why is it snowing? Because they're trying to bring that nostalgia back, because that's how the original Shining ended, in the snow. So I was like, okay, I can do without that. Then they go back to the hench maze, which was, okay, that makes sense. It tied into the story while delivering nostalgia. Then, they bring all the original ghosts back from The Shining, which made sense because within the story, Danny's going through some emotional turmoil. Dick teaches him how to fight these evil spirits. And then with them coming back at the end, it made sense for the character's journey. And so the final battle was very interesting. And it could have went off the rails. It could have just been like, oh, it's just nostalgia, and we're just gonna pump it into you, and there's no real purpose for it. But that's not the case. Mike Flanagan, I think, handled this very well. He did it tastefully, and it works on both ends. I think this is how you deliver nostalgia in a movie. You not only have it inject, some feelings of emotion to the past, for an audience, but you also have to have it be effective within the story you're trying to tell. And I think Mike Flanagan does that perfectly. He ties these two worlds together, which it should not work. It should just feel like this is just absolute nostalgia that has no reason to be here. But it has a reason. And I think it does, like what a lot of other reviewers said, I think it does tie up some loose ends that were in The Shining. Like one thing I will give away is that the whole Tony thing in The Shining was kind of confusing to me. But in this movie, they illustrate what it is, and that was beautiful. So I enjoyed the nostalgia in this movie. It did get my heart pounding, and it did make me go back to those glorious moments in The Shining. And it also played a part in the story in this movie and its progression, and it made sense. So I really enjoyed this movie. I was shocked because I was not looking forward to it. I was not expecting to be taken on this wild ride down memory lane, and also getting a nice, deep story about a person who's dealing with addiction and how they are fighting the demons of their past to become a new version of themselves, and then being, drawn back into the shit, as you could say, the shit of the situation. And it was great. It was great. I enjoyed the journey of all the characters in this movie and them coming to a head at the end. I think Mike Flanagan did an exceptional job crafting this movie. It's damn near perfect. The only negative thing I can say is a couple minor things, but at the beginning, yes, it did feel a bit choppy because they're introducing these characters and it goes back and forth and it just feels jarring to me. But it does illustrate who these people are, and after we get our initial introduction with them, it does start to build on from there to the ultimate climax, which is very exceptional. I think Mike Flanagan handled this really well, tying in the nostalgia to the story he was trying to tell. I like the progression of Dan Torrance in this movie, tying into his dad and him, struggling with the past of what happened to him in the Shining movie, and just seeing his journey from beginning to end is emotional. It has emotional depth to it, which I did not expect. And seeing the girl in this movie, Kayla Karan, she did a very great job acting-wise in this movie. She sold the scenes that she was in to perfection. Like I said, the scene where they killed this one boy and she's really emotional and sad about it was great. Her taking on Rebecca Ferguson in those dream sequences was amazing. I felt the emotional weight of that. Then seeing Rebecca Ferguson's cult in here and them doing what they're doing. Yes, they're a bunch of assholes, but we understand what they're doing. We see what they're doing. And it's their stories told in a way where it makes sense. Like I say, on a surface level, just looking at this stuff on paper, it's like this stuff is so ridiculous. But the way everyone involved, from the director to the actors, everything coming together, the way it's all put together and how it's executed is what makes this movie work. It works from top to bottom. The only thing I have a problem with is the beginning, how choppy it was. And you would think that the nostalgia in here would be over the top and overbearing and just be in here for no reason. But no, they use it as a way to progress the story and bring some closure to the Dan Torrance character. And it worked. So they not only delivered on the nostalgia, but it had an effective impact on the story, which is great. That I did not expect. Mike Flanagan did a phenomenal job with this movie. And that's all I have to say. So as always, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time.